Muscle and Fitness has put together their top 10 list of strength athletes all time, and they call this a definitive list. And I'm here to say there is no way that this is definitive. Let's go over the top 10. Some they got right, some they got wrong. At the end, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the people that they left out and who should have been mentioned. Now, let's kick off this list. It is a very obvious start with Brian Shaw. He is a 4-time world's strongest man, maximum deadlift of 467 kilos. That's around 1,025 pounds, and this is raw, among many other feats of strength. Not only did Brian Shaw achieve amazing feats of strength and prove many times over he was the strongest man in the world, he went up against arguably the best strength athlete of all time in Zydrunas, and he came out on top many times. He also did this over a career that lasted a very long time. There is no way to discount Brian Shaw from any top 10 list. And for number 10 on the list, now I'm assuming that these are not in order. Actually, no, sorry. They said they were in order. Ranking Brian Shaw at 10 feels extremely low compared to what I would expect him to be. But at number 10, definitely a deserving participant on the list, Brian Shaw. At number 9 is someone that I had actually never heard of before, whose name is Leonid Taranenko, who maybe I should have known this name because he did perform some absolutely incredible feats of strength. All the way back in 1998 in the 110 kilo weightlifting class. That's around 230 pounds, a little more, but this is not the heavyweight division. This is not the open division where we talk about guys like Lasha. He performed a 266 kilo clean and jerk and a 475 kilo weightlifting total in the 1998 World Championships. Now, these are incredible lifts for sure, but to me, if we're talking about strongest people of all time, I don't know why we're putting parameters of how large they were, what era they competed in. This might hurt some feelings, but to me, strong is strong. Whether you competed last week or 100 years ago, the weight is the weight, and there really shouldn't be a whole lot of grace given to any sort of caveats. Then we should start talking about people like John Hack, who pound for pound is probably the strongest person in terms of powerlifting of all time. But people have lifted bigger weights, so how could he be the strongest person of all time? Now, the reason I say that this isn't the best ever is because Lasha has done a 267 kilo clean and jerk, 1 kilo heavier than Leonid, and his total is 492 kilos, which he hit in 2021. This is 17 kilos higher than Leonid's total. So I don't see how someone who lifted less weight could be higher on the list. I'll give you a little surprise. Lasha doesn't appear on this list at all. I have no idea how, but I'm going to tell you him among others who I think have missed out on this list. But they had Leonid at number 9. At number 8 is a legend from the UK named Andy Bolton. Now, he is a iconic powerlifter and one that a lot of British strongmen that I'm friends with look up to in very high regard. Now, he did a 964-pound raw deadlift, and he did a lot of his competing in multiply, which is a suit that helps you. It basically restricts the movement you're trying to do so that the weight pushes you down and it adds weight to what you would be able to do. Now, in multiply equipment, he squatted over 1,200 pounds, which is absolutely insane. And his total of 2806 is number 6 of all time. Now, he dreamed of hitting 3,000 pounds in his powerlifting total. This is a feat that was later completed by two guys, powerlifting legends, Donnie Thompson and Dave Hoff, both not on this list. Now, Andy Bolton is an absolutely incredible athlete and was ahead of his time in a lot of ways, but I don't see how he could be ahead on the list when guys have exceeded his total by 200 pounds later on. Now, number 7 is Brian Siders. Brian Siders is another name that I had not heard of before. He has a single ply total of 2,651 pounds. Now, single ply is just a less supportive version of what Andy Bolton was wearing, and his total of 2,651 pounds is number 5 of all time. And with this, he did a over 1,000 pound squat, 800 pound bench press, and 832 pound deadlift. Now, Brian is on this list, but Blaine Sumner is not. Blaine Sumner with a 2,857 pound total, 200 pounds more than Brian Siders. Now, this was 11 years later, so again, Brian Siders, for his time, was absolutely incredible, but he has been surpassed by people who are more recent. I don't believe Brian Siders should be on this list. Hats off to him. Amazing, amazing feats of strength, but I don't see how people have lifted more, and he's included above them. Next up is a very famous historical strength figure. Again, I might hurt some feelings with this one, but this is Louis Uni, better known as Apollon the Mighty. Now, he's responsible for Apollon's wheels, which we still use a version of today. Now, these were made in late 1900s, late 1890s. And he had these 366-pound wheels manufactured, and as part of a show, he would lift them from the ground over his head. These have since been replaced with a heavier set of wheels, which, depending on the competition, it's over 400 pounds. It's a very famous Arnold Strongman Classic contest. I actually have one of the world records in this by lifting the 405-pound version of these wheels over my head 5 times. Now, Apollon the Mighty lifting 366 pounds over his head 1 time versus myself, 400 pounds 5 times. I don't see how he could be above me on this list. We can make arguments to the nth degree on what kind of belts and what kind of chalk, but all we can do is what has actually been done, not what possibly could have been done if apparatus was the same. Again, a very, very important figure of strength, but to say he is one of the strongest of all time, to say he is stronger than Andy Bolton and Brian Shaw, makes very, very little sense to me. Next up is a strongman, Vasil Veristic, and he is the only person to win IFSA and World's Strongest Man. Back about 15, 20 years ago, World's Strongest Man had a competitor come in called IFSA. IFSA stole a lot of the best athletes, and World's Strongest Man continued on. This is when Mariusz Pudzianowski won a lot of his World's Strongest Man titles, and someone like Zydrunas Savickas won a couple of IFSA titles. Now, Vasil is the only person to win both IFSA and World's Strongest Man, of course, other than Big Z. Now, he had a max log of 200 kilos, a max axle of 185 kilos, a max deadlift of 330 kilos, a max hammer tire of 401 kilos, which it's possible that he just wasn't pushed to his limit on these events. But again, all we can go off is what has actually been done. To give some frame of reference, I'll use myself as an example, and I don't believe I belong anywhere on this top 10 list. Even though I have one World's Strongest Man, there's a long way to go between what I've accomplished and being a top 10 strength athlete of all time, in my opinion. His max log is 200 kilos. I have done 213 kilos. His max axle is 185 kilos. My max axle is 217 kilos. His max deadlift is 330. I have done 475. His max hammer tire is 401. I have also done 475. So they're not even close to the numbers that the guys are doing today. Amazing strength athlete, some amazing accomplishments, but definitely a high level of confusion for me on how he is ranked above Andy Bolton, Brian Shaw, and all of the other names that I've listed above. I don't know where this comes from. To be honest, I might be ignorant, but everything that I look up on Vasil from good, reputable sources over on Strongman Archives, I can't find lifts or results that would indicate that he is one of the best top 5 strongest people of all time. Number 4 is probably the most iconic strength athlete, or at least one of them. His name is Paul Anderson. He was the 1956 Olympic weightlifting champion, and this was with a total of 805 pounds. This was back in the day where they also did the strict press along with the clean and jerk and the snatch, so I've removed that and only talked about the 2 lifts that are also done today. This is 280 pounds shy of the current world record. Now, Paul Anderson in 1956 was absolutely in a league of his own. Who knows what could have happened if he was pushed to his limit by someone like Lasha. But the fact is he wasn't. And his total sits at 805 pounds. Again, 280 pounds shy of the current world record. The one thing that Paul Anderson did do, and he did some other unique feats of strength that have added to the folklore and added to the legend of himself, the 6,270 pound backlift. This was done on Strongest Man in History by Brian Shaw, Eddie Hall, Nick Best, and Robert Oberst on the History Channel. They attempted this, and I believe a couple of them actually exceeded this weight. But this is something that we don't really do, and I have no idea what a huge backlift would be, but 6,270 pounds is something that I just don't think I would even bother to attempt because I would worry too much about what might happen to my body. So, on one hand, 280 pounds shy of current world record in weightlifting tells me he is nowhere near this list, but a 6,270 pound backlift, I don't know. Maybe he does belong in this list. Go ahead and let me know in the comments below. Number three. Now, the next three are very legitimate cases, in my opinion. They say these are the top three of all time. Number three is Bill Kazmaier. He was both a powerlifter and a strongman. In powerlifting, he had a 2,425 pound total in single ply. At that time, this was incredible. This currently stands as the 54th best total of all time. In strongman, he was a three-time World's Strongest Man champion before being kicked out for being too dominant. He won in 1980, 81, 82, and in 83, he simply wasn't invited back because in those days, it was purely a TV show, and he just was way too dominant that if he turned up, there was no TV show to be had because he would go out and win virtually everything. To talk about his best lifts ever, he had a 415 kilo deadlift, a 440 kilo squat, 170 kilo log press. These numbers, again, for his time, absolutely incredible, but the best deadlift in history right now is 86 kilos heavier than his deadlift. His 440 kilo squat falls a little bit shy of the numerous 1,000-pound squatters that we have, which is 453.5 kilos, and his 170 kilo log press would be beaten by virtually every pro strongman on the circuit at the moment, where the world record sits at 230 kilos by Iron Bibby. I had the privilege to watch that in person in Glasgow at an event last year. Now, does Bill belong on this list? I think for his time, absolutely. He was the best strength athlete that existed on the planet at that time. For all time, the numbers are simply lower than they are for other people. So this is where I'm really split. If he was pushed, could he have done bigger numbers? I believe yes. But he wasn't pushed. So how can we say he definitely would have done X, Y, and Z based on the equipment or based on whatever? You know, if we look at every athlete in every sport, over time, they tend to get better. This is not a disrespect to people who existed before because they were stepping stones, whether mentally proving that things were possible or physically showing people that things could be done. But they have been exceeded, whether it's sprinting or marathon running or weightlifting or powerlifting or strongman. These numbers, they have been beat. So with Bill, I'm a little bit 50-50 because he was so successful at winning multiple world championships. But if I hold it to the same standard as someone like Paul Anderson, as Apollon the Mighty, as Andy Bolton, as Brian Siders, what they've done based on what's been done all time, it doesn't fit for me on the top 10 list. I will tell you who I do believe should be on the top 10 list in a moment. Number two was Mark Henry. Now, Mark is, first of all, an absolutely incredible person, incredibly smart, not only strong from knowing him, but Mark was the only person of all time to be the U.S. powerlifting and the U.S. weightlifting champion at the same time. He's also a WWE superstar. That's how most people would know Mark Henry, but he is an absolutely 100% legitimate strength athlete. He had a 2,337 pound powerlifting total. This does have him down at 259th of all time. I think when we talk about dominant athletes for their time with the competition that they had, Mark Henry was not to be matched. But it was well back before some equipment advancements, some just advancements in us knowing what the human body can do. Mark also competed naturally, which is something that I'm not talking about a whole lot in this list because I don't know for most of these guys. But with Mark, he is very, very open and adamant that he did all of his lifting drug-free, which takes all of his accomplishments certainly up a notch with what he was just able to do naturally. There are also, with a lot of guys on this list, and Mark in particular, there's some things that he could do that just no one would even think of doing. Let's take the Apollon's wheels, for example. For him, or for most people, you clean it to your stomach, you flip it up, and then you press. But Mark took the wheels the first time they were there and cleaned them straight to his shoulders and then pressed them overhead like it was absolutely nothing. These were the 166 kilo version of the original Apollon's wheels. But compared to everyone else in the competition, it was absolutely absurd. I encourage you to go check out that video. Mark Henry, Apollon wheels. Maybe one of the coolest feats of strength of all time, just to absolutely manhandle a piece of equipment that had really never been done in modern history. The Arnold brings it back, and he makes it his baby. Number one on this list, 100% deserving. I believe also to be the number one if we're looking at all time. There are a couple of people who I think contest him, who we'll talk about in a second. But just in terms of pedigree, he is not to be touched. This is Big Z. He had 4 World's Strongest Man, 2 IFSA championships, the organization that I spoke about before, 8 Arnold Strongman Classic championships, 70 plus world records, some of which still stand today. He had every shoulder press record you could imagine. And frankly, he probably could have done more if he was pushed to his absolute limit. And he is someone who deserves all of the respect in the world in the strongman scene, in the strength sports scene. He is the best strength athlete of all time, in my opinion, in terms of pedigree, in terms of actual lifts. Let's talk about some people who might usurp him. There's one man who I believe to be the strongest person who ever lived in a particular year. This year was 2018, and this was Hafthor Bjornsson, standing at 6'8", 440 plus pounds. He has the deadlift world record at 501 kilos. He has lifted more weight from the ground to his waist than anyone in history. He has squatted 1,000 pounds, albeit not to depth, but a 6'8" man squatting 1,000 pounds. And he didn't do it at 100% maximum effort. I'm sure he could have gone a little bit deeper and hit that with powerlifting depth. He has won every strongman competition that he has competed in terms of he has won World's Strongest Man before, he has won the Arnold Strongman Classic before. And in his day, in 2018, he is absolutely untouchable in terms of the best all-around strength athlete. If I had to put one person out to compete against any other person in history, 2018 Thor is my guy. Does that put him above Big Z in terms of best person of all time? Well, I think Prime Z, Prime Thor, who wins, depends on the competition, but I think more times than not, Hafthor would win if it was 2018 Hafthor. Now, this is a toss-up, but I believe 1-2 is Hafthor and Big Z. Another big strongman who deserves mentioning is Eddie Hall, who lifted 500 kilos in the deadlift, and this was a world record by 36 kilos, 37 kilos on the day. It wasn't even fathomable that someone could lift 500 kilos off the ground, and Eddie did that under strongman conditions, which is absolutely incredible. He also had the axle world record at 216 kilos, very, very narrowly missed a 230 kilo log press. And I believe there's not really a question that he was the strongest static strongman of all time. Now, to talk about some other names. First of all, I talked about Lasha. He is the number one weightlifter of all time in terms of total. How he is not the number one person in terms of weightlifting, he needs to be top 10 strength athlete of all time. 492 kilogram total, a two-time gold medalist. Now, that 492 kilo total is a world record. So is the clean and jerk individually, and so is the snatch individually. There's no one in history who's done a bigger clean and jerk or a bigger snatch. Obviously, that would equate to the biggest total of all time. Now, he also has every world title and every Olympic gold medal in heavyweight weightlifting for men since 2015. This is 8+ years, a streak that is still going, and this is before he competes at the 2024 Paris Olympics, where he is the odds-on favorite to win yet another gold medal. I think he's coming to the end of his career, but hopefully we get to see a few more incredible feats of strength from Lasha. He would be on my list for sure. Next up, Blaine Sumner would be on my top 10 list. He's the number one equipped powerlifter of all time when it comes to single ply. He has done a 2,857 total, an 1,185 pound squat, and a 939 pound bench. His squat and his bench are both number 2 of all time. To have one guy have the second best squat of all time and second best bench of all time when you have people dedicate all of their training just to those lifts is absolutely mind-blowing. Blaine Sumner would definitely be on my list. Next up is Dan Bell, who would be on my list with an 1,102 pound squat and a 2,606 total. This is with raw plus wraps. Okay, so this is number 1 for raw plus wraps of all time, meaning no supportive equipment other than wrapping his knees on squat. Arguably for safety, it does help you lift a little bit more weight. Otherwise, bench press, normal setup, no sleeves on the elbows, just wrist wraps, and your might, and you're good to go. And deadlift, no deadlift suit, no straps, just hold on to the bar and pull. Dan Bell, number 1 raw plus wraps of all time, he would be on my list. Next up, Jesus Oliveira, the number 1 raw tested powerlifter of all time, and the number 1 raw untested powerlifter of all time. He competes in a tested federation, but no one untested has beat him either. This is with a 1,036 pound raw squat. This is only in sleeves. Standard knee sleeves that you would see coming into the gym. Absolutely mind-blowing. And he's done a 600 pound bench, a 900 deadlift for a 2451 total. If we compare that to someone like Dan Bell, who's done it done raw plus wraps, not tested, Well, he is only about 60 pounds off of that. If you put wraps on your knees, that's going to add more than 60 pounds. Never mind performance enhancement. So Jesus Oliveira, phenomenal strength athlete and deserves to be on this list. So that is my thoughts. I would love to know what you guys think. Who do you agree with on that top 10 list? Do you agree with my replacements for some of those people? And do you think the historic strongman figures should be recognized? If they are, there are two historic figures who should be spoken about. One Canadian man who was Louis Cyr, and two, Eugene Sandow. If we're recognizing historical strength figures, they should be right beside Apollo and the Mighty and the other historical amazing strength athletes who we have built our careers off the back of. The air conditioning is broken in my home in the guest wing where I record this video. Excuse the profuse amount of sweat, but strength sports get me excited. Let me know what you think. Who would be in your top 10 list? Do you think I have it right with my replacements, or do you think we should give respect to people who we have built these sports off of? Let me know in the comments. As per usual, lift heavy, be kind. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you next time.